The Vietnam War, the geographical context. Vietnam is a long, thin country on the Indochina Peninsula in Southeast Asia. Notice Vietnam's proximity to China, Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. Again, note Vietnam's proximity to China, Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. The historical context. Indochina, including Vietnam, was a colony of France from the late 1800s until World War II. The French treated the Vietnamese badly. As a result, the Vietnamese often rebelled. The Communist Party in Vietnam organized many of the rebellions. The group's leader was Ho Chi Minh. World War II. In 1941, Japan conquered Vietnam. That year, Vietnamese communists combined with other groups to form an organization called the Viet Minh. The Viet Minh's goal was to achieve independence for Vietnam. In 1945, Japan was defeated in World War II. As a result, the Japanese left Vietnam. The Viet Minh claimed independence for Vietnam. 1946 to 1954. However, France wanted to retake control of Vietnam. French troops moved back into the country in 1946. They conquered the southern half of Vietnam. The Viet Minh took control of the north. For the next 8 years, the two sides fought for control of the entire country. The United States supported France during the war. America considered the Viet Minh to be communists. The U.S., like other Western nations, was determined to stop the spread of communism. President Eisenhower explained the country's policy with what became known as the domino theory in April 1954. Eisenhower compared many of the world's smaller countries to dominoes. If one fell to communism, the rest would also fall. China fell in 1949. North Korea invaded South Korea in June 1950. And the Korean War ended in a stalemate in July 1953. The Viet Minh defeated the French. The final blow came in 1954. That year, the Viet Minh conquered the large French outpost at Dien Bien Phu. Several countries met with the French and the Viet Minh to negotiate a peace agreement. The agreement was known as the Geneva Accords. It temporarily split Vietnam in half. The Viet Minh controlled North Vietnam. The anti-communist nationalists controlled South Vietnam. The peace agreement called for an election to unify the country in 1956. Ho Chi Minh led North Vietnam. Ngo Dinh Diem led South Vietnam. When it came time for the all-country elections, Diem refused to take part. He feared that Ho would win, and then all of Vietnam would become communist. The U.S. supported Diem's decision. The U.S. provided aid to Diem. America hoped that Diem could turn South Vietnam into a strong, independent nation. Diem, however, turned out to be a terrible ruler. His administration was corrupt. He also refused to allow opposing views. By 1957, a rebel group had formed in the South. The group was known as the Viet Cong. It fought against Diem's rule. Ho Chi Minh supported the Viet Cong from the north. He supplied arms to the group along a network of paths that ran between North and South Vietnam. Together, these paths became known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. John Kennedy became president after Eisenhower. Kennedy continued America's policy of supporting South Vietnam. He, like Eisenhower, did not want to see the communists take over Vietnam. Kennedy increased aid to Diem and sent thousands of military advisors to help train South Vietnam's troops. Meanwhile, Diem's government grew more unstable. The Viet Cong rebels were gaining greater support among the peasants. The Kennedy administration decided that Diem had to step down. In 1963, Vietnamese military leaders overthrew Diem. Against Kennedy's wishes, they executed Diem. 2 months later, Kennedy himself was assassinated. The Vietnam crisis now belonged to President Lyndon Johnson. In 1965, Johnson began sending U.S. troops to Vietnam to fight the Viet Cong. Most of the president's advisors and much of the public agreed with Johnson's decision. Many Americans believed in stopping the spread of communism. By the end of 1965, the U.S. had sent more than 180,000 troops to Vietnam. The U.S. commander in Vietnam was General William Westmoreland. Westmoreland wasn't impressed with the Army of Republic of Vietnam and asked for more troops. By 1967, almost 500,000 U.S. soldiers were fighting in Vietnam.